Our next guest has been representing the state of Kentucky in the United States Senate since 2010. Senator Rand Paul serves on Foreign Relations, Health, Education, Labor, Pensions, Homeland Security, and Government Affairs and Small Business Committees. He believes that the primary constitutional function of the federal government is the national defense, bar none. He is a staunch opponent of government outreach. He also believes the Founding Fathers understood the seriousness of war and the decision to wage war should not be made lightly, but we must go to the war. We must fight the war to win. Please join me in welcoming Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky.
Thank you. Good morning. I had to come by boat this morning. It's raining cats and dogs out there, but we made it. I came up from Bowling Green, about a 2-hour drive. It's a humbling experience to be here with you today. I'm honored to speak before soldiers who put everything on the line for your country. We welcome you to Kentucky. In Kentucky, we're proud to host our brave young men at Fort Campbell and Fort Knox. And we're proud to host the veterans of foreign wars today. Senators, like soldiers, take an oath to defend the Constitution against our enemies. I consider it the primary and foremost duty of the federal government to defend America, to defend our Bill of Rights, and to defend our God-given liberties. For inspiration and guidance, I often look towards America's great military leaders. Some of the best observations on war and policy and diplomacy came from the president, who was also one of the most decorated generals, Dwight Eisenhower. Author David Nichols writes that Ike believed, with good reason, that once the violence begins, everything changes and you throw out your plans. You throw your plans in the trash. It's too bad more in Washington don't heed Ike's advice. There is no greater priority for the federal government, though, than the defense of the Constitution and the defense of the nation. Yet sometimes I think our defense is weakened by our overeagerness to be involved in every civil war on the planet. In Egypt, the administration insists on sending F-16s and Abrams tanks to the new military junta. Before that, we sent arms and billions in aid to Morsi's radical Islamic government. And before that, we sent F-16s, tanks, and $60 billion to Hosni Mubarak, a dictator whom we called an ally. Common sense tells us that we probably shouldn't be sending our aid to military dictators or to the Muslim Brotherhood. Common sense tells us that we probably shouldn't be delivering advanced weaponry into unstable situations where the outcome is completely unpredictable. Common sense tells us that we shouldn't be sending foreign aid to nations that burn our flag. I've tried to stop the continuous flow of your money to countries that hate us and also hate Israel. I have warned that someday these arms that we paid for may be used against us or may be used to attack Israel. In 2012, I introduced an amendment in the Senate halting transport of all weapons to Egypt, Pakistan, and Libya. And when I did, what kind of response did I get? This amendment would have prevented the shipment of weapons to the Muslim Brotherhood. What kind of response did I get? Over 75% of the American people are against arming the Muslim Brotherhood, yet over 75% of the U.S. Senate voted to continue arming the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamic radicals. In Egypt, the regimes keep changing, but our system of foreign aid still stays the same. It's unbelievable. Unlike Eisenhower and earlier generations, we often don't think before we act. I think many in Washington do things in our foreign policy to accomplish short-term goals, but that they ultimately hurt our long-term national interests. As we continue to aid and arm despotic regimes in Egypt, we are also about to send weapons to Islamic rebels in Syria. This is problematic on multiple levels. The Assad regime is no friend of freedom or the United States, but this does not mean that the enemy of our enemy is our friend. There are currently 17 different rebel groups in Syria, including the largest group, al-Nusra. Al-Nusra fighters are radical, anti-American jihadists, and they're affiliated with al-Qaeda. But your politicians in Washington are eager to send weapons. They promise, oh, these weapons won't get into the hands of the enemy. I don't believe it. Does anyone believe that? We have trouble telling friend from foe in Afghanistan, which is much more stable. Syria is 1,000 times more chaotic. Even our chairman of the Joint Chief of Staffs, General Martin Dempsey, warns it's becoming increasingly difficult to tell friend from foe in Syria. Would Eisenhower, who believed small wars could lead to big wars, would he buy into this nonsense? Even if you believe that we should arm Islamic fighters in Syria, shouldn't we at the very least have Congress vote on the matter? The Constitution is very clear. Congress is to declare war, not the president. Nevertheless, President Obama is moving ahead with plans to get involved in the Syrian civil war without the authorization of Congress. How can we ask our brave young men and women to fight against al-Qaeda in some countries and with al-Qaeda in other countries? Last week I was told by the administration, you know what their goal is in Syria? To fight to stalemate. I've told them I'm not sending my kids or your kids or any American soldiers to fight for stalemate. When we fight to win, we fight for American principles, we fight under the American flag, and we come home after we win. A great irony is that these weapons that they want to send to Syria may well be used against the 2 million Christians who live in Syria. They're protected by the Assad regime. I, for one, will fight with every ounce of my energy to prevent arms, American arms, that you paid for from being used against Christians. If our policies in Egypt and Syria aren't bad enough, look at Pakistan. When we finally caught bin Laden, he was in Pakistan, and it was due in no small part to help from a man by the name of Dr. Shakil Afridi. Now Pakistan has imprisoned Dr. Afridi, likely for the rest of his life, for the supposed crime of helping us catch bin Laden. How does President Obama respond? Does he do anything to tell Pakistan he's unhappy? No, he continues to send Pakistan billions of dollars in aid. Last year, I introduced legislation that would have made aid to Pakistan contingent upon the release of Dr. Afridi. If we want human intelligence, if we want people to help America, we have to defend them after they help us. While the American public overwhelmingly supports limiting foreign aid, the Senate once again votes against any conditions on that aid. Why do we arm dictators and the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt? Why do we arm affiliates of al-Qaeda and endanger Christians in Syria? Why do we reward Pakistan with our tax dollars as they continue to imprison the man who helped us to catch bin Laden? The first and primary function of our government is a strong national defense, but so much of what Washington today is more like an irrational offense. How does sending foreign aid to Egypt, Syria, and Pakistan help our national security? In Egypt and Pakistan, they riot and burn our flag. I say not one penny more to any nation that burns our flag. In Libya, your politicians also are playing both sides. Reagan rightfully called the dictator Muammar Gaddafi the mad dog of the Middle East. Gaddafi was responsible for the Pan Am bombing over Lockerbie, Scotland, which killed hundreds of civilians and included American school children. After Reagan, though, some genius in our government decided to begin sending aid to Gaddafi. Members of the U.S. Senate, who were still there, actually traveled to visit Gaddafi and offered to send him arms. Within a year, though, these exact same senators flip-flopped, and now they have begun supporting weapons. They began supporting weapons to the Islamic rebels who overthrew Gaddafi. So which is it? They're either for or against. They're for Gaddafi before they're against Gaddafi. A year later, our ambassador to Libya and other diplomats were murdered on the streets of Benghazi. To this day, not one terrorist has been caught or captured or held responsible. Ambassador Stevens pleaded for more security before the attacks, and the Secretary of State ignored his pleas. The Marines from Tripoli were ordered to stand down. Who made that order? Marines are famous for risking their lives to rescue their wounded, and sometimes even risking their lives to rescue their dead. Who ordered the Marines to stand down? Did a politician intervene to cause our Marines to stand down? Democrats and Republicans can disagree on many issues, but one thing we should agree on as Americans: no politician should ever stand in the way of American soldiers doing their job. And no politician should remain in office who refuses to defend our diplomats. No politician should lead this country who denies our armed services the weapons and technology to defend our great nation. America has never backed down from a fight, but we should never be a nation that is eager to get involved in civil wars that don't affect our national security. President Eisenhower said, "I have one yardstick by which I test every major problem, and that yardstick is it good for America?" In our current foreign policy, is it good for America? Is our involvement in Egypt, Syria, and Pakistan to our benefit or our detriment? We must have the strongest military on earth, not because we are eager to use it, but so that no one would ever dare challenge us. I believe Ronald Reagan got it right when he said, "As for the enemies of freedom, those who are our potential adversaries, they will be reminded that peace is the highest aspiration of the American people. We will negotiate for it, sacrifice for it, but we will not surrender for it, now or ever." Reagan went on to say, "Our forbearance, though, should never be misunderstood. Our reluctance for conflict should not be misjudged as a failure of will. When action is required to preserve our national security, we will act. We will maintain sufficient strength to prevail if need be, knowing that if we do so, we have the best chance of never having to use that strength. For our country's sake, certainly for our soldiers' sake, for the sake of every veteran who has ever donned a uniform and fought for this country, America's mission should always be to keep the peace, not to police the world. An America that did not seek to become involved in every conflict of the world would take better care of our nation's greatest resources, our soldiers, including improving a broken VA system and better overall health care for those who've served. My wife and I work together to help build homes for wounded veterans through helpingahero.org. Our commitment to our brave young men and women doesn't end when they come home from war. It is just the beginning. A strong national defense is a constitutional priority. A lifelong commitment to our veterans is an obligation. It is our obligation. As a physician, when I visited Walter Reed, I was profoundly impacted by our wounded men and women, many of them not much older than my kids. This reinforced my view on the need to prevent conflicts unless they are absolutely necessary. War is the last resort, not the first. Soldiers injured in Iraq and Afghanistan will require a lifetime of care. It is our sacred duty to provide and protect those who have protected us. We must be more prudent, though, in our foreign policy. Eisenhower was right to observe that little wars often become big wars. Reagan was right that America's purpose is to promote peace through strength. Those of you here today, veterans of foreign wars, did your duty, and we honor your service to protect the peace. We pay our respect to you here today. We thank you for your service, and we also pay our respect to those who are not with us today, those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. Ronald Reagan once said, "Above all, we must realize that no arsenal or no weapon in the arsenals of the world is so formidable as the will and moral courage of free men and women. It is a weapon our adversaries in today's world do not have. America has always been a beacon of freedom to the world, due in no small part to the brave sacrifice and noble service of the members of the United States military. Today, I salute you and offer your nation's gratitude for a job well done. Thank you, and God bless America."